This is R1 and 3 Autoethnography with your host, Stephen. On today's episode, we have a special guest, Nicholas, who is a psychology major here at University of Saskatchewan and has a history with depression and anxiety. On this podcast, we talk about our lived experiences with mental illness. So before we get started, you gotta know that we are not medical professionals, and you should see your doctor if you're concerned about your mental well-being. So why don't you introduce yourself, Nick?
I really don't know what else to say. You pretty much just...
Oh, okay, my bad.
I've been roommates with Steven for the past 2 years. We met in first year of university. We usually just met at parties, and then in the second year we decided to live together with Levi Tarr as well.
We hate Levi. We're not going to mention his name on this podcast anymore because he's gone. So you're a psychology student here at University of Saskatchewan. Why did you choose to go into that?
It's because, I don't know, I've had a fair of experiences with mental health problems, and not just by me, but like I see people around me, from my friends to a couple of family members. I also have my own problems. Kind of want to become a counselor, and my rationale behind that is maybe by helping others, I could help myself.
I like that. That's nice.
Maybe find some insight about my own problems.
So it was in university that you realized you wanted to be in psychology?
Yeah, because it's a bit of more development in my mental health problems. I found like I had an increase of depression, increase in anxiety, and I don't know, like I took a couple of psychology classes in my first year at uni before I decided that was what my major was going to be in. I found them really interesting, and I did fairly well in them in my first year. So I just decided I should make the swap from chemistry to psychology.
So you mentioned there that you started to have more mental health problems once you came to university. Why do you think that is?
Like starting a whole new life sort of in a different city. That's pretty intimidating, especially if you are already suffering from prior mental health problems. It can be really hard to force yourself to like start new friendships. And in terms of my mental health problems, I don't know if it had to do with like just the fact that I was in the real world, or there's a history of depression in my family, both from my mom and my dad's side. Pretty much means that like my fate was kind of sewed already. So there's a chance that could have like just aggravated what was already there. I was first getting help for depression beginning of 8th grade. Then it was just social intervention. I wasn't put on meds until grade 12.
What was it that made you go to get diagnosed in 8th grade?
After the first day of 8th grade, I remember waking up and I had this weird, like this urge, like this self-hatred of myself. It was like, I have no idea what caused it. I literally just woke up one day and I had a lot of thoughts of self-hate. I had a couple of thoughts of like self-harm. Like I had this weird urge to kill myself, basically.
What were you feeling at the time?
I literally can't really describe it. Like I just woke up and then just all of a sudden, oh my God, why are you like this? Why did you do that thing like however months ago back? Like it was a combination of anxiety and depression just like bombarding me all at the same time. I have no idea what caused it. I literally just woke up and then just like that.
So what did you do with those thoughts?
What I did with those thoughts, I kind of stuffed. It's very unhealthy, but this was before I was getting counseling. I kind of pushed those thoughts back to the back of my brain, and I thought about them a couple of times after that, because, like, I think that was like the first time I've ever had thoughts of self-harm, and it was just so sudden. There was no provoking it, like it was scary. So
did they kind of continue past that first time?
not until years after, which is weird. One night I came home, had a bad day at school, and the thing about me when I was younger, like even now, I'm like, you never see it, but like at home, when I'm at home in Moose Jaw, I was always a little angry, like a little violent in my head, not necessarily to the point where like I expressed it in public, but like, I don't know, it's visible at home. Like I was a very angry, unhappy adolescent.
That's reasonable. So after that episode of depression and anxiety and all this anger, what happened next?
Yeah, no, I came home from a really shitty day at school, or like filled with anger, of course, and just, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff in this that I don't really want to talk about.
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with.
So I came home on the verge of a mental breakdown. Like there's a fight between my parents that began. I can't even really remember what it was about, but it was enough to put me to the edge. And I remember yelling at both my parents to shut the fuck up, like 3 times in a row, like at the top of my lungs too. And I remember my mom went out for a smoke, and then I was talking to my dad. I told him how I've been having suicidal thoughts and I wanted to kill myself. And then he talked about it with my mom, and then my mom came into my room and was like, "We're getting you counseling." And of course I was against it at the time, because like no one really wants to admit that they have something wrong with them, right? It's really hard to admit. Then in 8th grade, it was against my will. Well, yeah, because I was like the adolescent, they were the parents, right? So I really didn't have to have a say. So it was about like 4 or 5 months of social intervention. I wasn't put on medication until grade 12, but that's a different story. The social intervention did work for my depression. However, what happened afterwards is it was kind of a weird trade-off, but from depression to social anxiety. For the next several years after going to counseling for my depression, I've developed a social anxiety. I had a constant fear that whatever thoughts I was popping into my head, like I was mind-numbingly saying out loud, or I was scared that I was murmuring, just my thoughts. And they weren't even bad thoughts. It's just I was considered people like, oh, what if people hear me talking to myself like that? That's weird. Like, like, or talk to yourself in public. That's weird. So like, I was just always very self-conscious. Like whenever I just simply think. Like I also used social anxiety from grade 8 till mid-grade 11 as a kind of a unhealthy mechanism to keep myself in check.
Keep yourself in check?
Keep myself in check, like from doing something stupid, like overthinking every little decision that I would make, like, okay, if I said this, how would this affect this person? Would this start any beef, like, or is this unnecessary?
So keep yourself in check, like keep your anger in check?
Not even so much to keep my anger in check. It was really, I felt a need to, like, I didn't want to make an ass of myself in public. And like, that's the whole point of social anxiety, right? It's like, okay, I really don't want to, like, I don't want to act in a way that makes me look foolish in front of people. So I used that as a mechanism to constantly, like, okay, well, I have this weird thought. Don't follow through with the thought, whatever weird thought it was. It changed day to day. It was nothing bad, nothing violent. It was just, it was just weird thoughts, like weird things to say in conversations. And I was like, no, don't say that.
But did you find like the thoughts weird, or were you more scared of what people would think of those thoughts if you expressed them?
I think it was more of a fear that I feared judgment. This is, of course, a lot of kids in high school would, because there's always like the media portrayal of high school is you need to fit in, or you're just that nobody quote.
And no one wants to be different.
And everyone wants to conform. Everyone wants to fit in. And that was my constant fear, is like these weird thoughts that I'm having in my head. Like I feel like I'm very different from everyone else. I need to keep these thoughts inside me so I can keep on being like within my friend group. I don't want to like deviate from, just social norms.
Did you ever share these experiences, these thoughts with anyone at the time, aside from your father and counselor?
After counseling in 8th grade, I was pretty open about my anxiety with my parents. I think the first non-family member that I opened up to about my mental health problems was my buddy at home, my best friend. His name's Ryan. I remember that we were out for a cruise one night, because what else is there to do in Moose Jaw? Me and Ryan, we drove around one night, and I told him about my problems with anxiety. I think that's the first talk that I specifically had, or like that's like the first official talk where I said to Ryan, okay, yeah, I'm suffering from social anxiety. I'm suffering, or at the time I wasn't suffering from depression. This happens like a couple of months after, at the beginning of grade 12. But even before this talk in the car with Ryan, I'm sure him and others that I was close, relatively, like he's my closest friend, but there's other people that I was close with. But I'm pretty sure he got an idea that like I suffer from some sort of social anxiety, because occasionally I would tap his shoulder and be like, hey, I wasn't talking to myself, was I? Like I constantly asked for reassurance, like, hey, I wasn't saying anything weird, was I? I was like, no, I didn't hear you at all. And even my teachers, like during interviews, they always comment about how quiet I am. Like, well, all these people are telling me that I'm quiet, I'm not as loud or as talkative, or at least I'm not as what I fear that I am. And I'm getting that feedback. But the thing about social anxiety is you can't exactly believe in that stuff, because there's always that bully inside your head that's constantly like, oh, they're lying to you. You're actually doing all of this. And yeah, no. I sidetracked from depression to social anxiety. My bad.
No, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. So after you had that conversation with Ryan, how were you feeling?
I honestly can't say how I felt about that. Like, I didn't have a bad feeling or a good feeling. There have been instances, like if we cut forward to first year uni, where I've had mental breakdowns in front of my previous high school buddies, and the next day I was filled with regret. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe they saw me like this. Like, now they know what's going on in my head. And I just felt embarrassed. I felt a bit of shame, even though there's really talking about the stuff isn't at all shameful. It's just how it came out. I felt a little embarrassed.
Yeah, like rather than a conversation, it was a breaking point.
Yeah.
So before that, you never had that conversation with them that you were diagnosed with anxiety or depression?
No, Ryan was the only person I ever told.
How did they interpret it?
That night that I broke down, I was constantly scared that I felt like they were trying to abandon me. And, I just moved up here to university, and I like just the thought of being alone in a city where you're new to is just terrifying to me. And I don't know, that's just how I felt at that breaking point. Is like, I thought like, okay, these guys are trying hard to give me the boot. So I was honest to them about that. I told them, I feel like you guys are trying to give me the boot. I was honest to them about my social anxiety. I came out about my depression. I told them I've had thoughts of self-harm. The next day, I got a couple of messages from them, and they just, like Ryan, reassured me, like, hey, don't worry about it. Like, everyone has these moments. I remember one friend was like, hey, like, everyone has these moments. Like, I remember so-and-so had one of these moments, and like, the stuff happens. Like, don't feel embarrassed. Don't feel any shame about reaching your breaking point, about telling us how, like, or letting loose about how you've been feeling lately in terms of anxiety and depression. Like,
and did you believe them?
I did. I woke up. Yeah, I woke up. I got a couple texts saying, it's okay. And at that moment, I did feel reassured. Still embarrassed, but reassured. We're taking a lot of sidetracks. It's hard to.
No, it doesn't matter. It's a conversation. It's not a structured thingy. So it sounds like once you came to university, you were, well, not forced to come to terms with your diagnosis. Before you came here, how did you feel about getting diagnosed? Because you mentioned earlier that you were afraid to be like labeled with something, right?
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't say that I was feared about being labeled as someone who's mentally ill, someone who's depressed or anxious. I think I was just feared of being labeled as someone who was quote unquote weird or I don't know. Yeah, no, like weird's probably like the best way to describe it. And it wasn't so much as I was scared that, like, hey, if people know that I'm constantly sad, then they would look at me a different way. That's not at all what I feared. I really don't know what I'm trying to say here.
So like conformity rather than the stigma of mental illness. It was being different.
Yeah. It was being different rather than the stigma of mental illness.
So did you kind of fight the diagnosis, or were you kind of eager to accept it once you got diagnosed with depression and anxiety?
I was I think I accepted it fairly quickly. Now 8th grade was a different matter. I'd like to talk about like 12th grade, because 12th grade I actually actively went to my mom and I was like, hey, I think I want to go back to counseling. I don't feel happy. I feel constantly sad.
So you were confident in counseling. You felt like it was providing a lot for you.
Yes. The difference between the counseling in grade 12 and the counseling I received in grade 8 is, in grade 12 is when I became medicated. And I remember starting on my meds. It made the symptoms worsen for like 2-3 days. And then after that, for the next week and a half, I just had no emotion. Admittedly, that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
I felt like a zombie, though. Like, you could tell me something happy, you could tell me something sad. Like, I would be indifferent to either one. After the first 2 weeks, I was a lot more confident in myself. I could definitely say I was the happiest I've been in years. Like, I couldn't even remember when the last time I was not upset or not unhappy. It felt kind of unfamiliar, as sad as that is to say. But it was very nice. And yeah, I've been on medication ever since. And it takes more than just medication and counseling. You also need to you need to put what you learn in counseling into practice. And I'll be honest, that's something I struggle with.
Why was it difficult to apply counseling or therapy outside of it?
I think it's because unless someone's constantly reminding me to do it, I don't normally think of it, which I don't know, if it's something that you haven't routinely done in the past, well, it's difficult to start. Even with taking medication, I found it difficult to make it into a routine.
Yeah, honestly, I find it hard to stay consistent with it too, because, it's another thing that you have to do. Transitioning from high school, it sounds like you kind of relied on your parents as social support. So what happens once you didn't have that anymore?
Well, in my first year of uni, I lived with Ryan, so I still had him as social support. I also had my brother there too. When it came to university, like I had to force myself to branch out, basically.
Force yourself in what way?
Like, I went to parties on my own. In lectures, I forced myself to talk with the people beside me, get to know them. I made a couple of really good friendships from both the lectures and from parties. Well, I met you at a party.
Yeah, we were both standing in the corner and there was a fan. I went up to Nick, hey, that's a nice fan.
That's a nice fan.
It is a nice fan.
Really, really hot in here.
Yeah.
Let me just take my sweater off.
I know we live together, but anyways, how were you feeling when you were doing all of that?
Well, in first year, it's a lot of partying. So in most of these situations, I was drunk.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a little easement in it.
Yeah,
more
a little
or less.
easier.
But it was still a scary thought. Like, you're going into you're starting this new life. Like I have my Moose Jaw life and I have my Saskatoon life. You're starting this new life. You need to branch out, meet new people, and that takes force. And it can be someone with anxiety. This could be the scariest thing for them. Like, just the thought of like meeting someone like just on a whim, basically.
Like, if you were to, or what was going on in your head when you were, trying to talk to that stranger beside you in lecture? What were you thinking?
I think what I was thinking was, God, don't say anything weird. pretty much the go-to. Even at the beginning of high school, I forced myself to make new connections. And I've kind of noticed this pattern between life shifts. Whenever I make a life shift from, for instance, from grade 8 to high school, or from high school to university, I tend to get more outgoing because I feel like, okay, this is going to be a new chapter. There's going to be new people in my life. As the life period continues on, I seem to become more and more quiet with the people I'm associated with. And it's because of anxiety. I don't know why when I don't know why it's this way. Like, you'd think it'd be the opposite. Like, I'd be shy at the beginning and then I'd make these strong connections and I'd be more outgoing. But it's like this, like I said, I start very confident, outgoing, and I tend to become more shy. I talked to this about my therapist, and we're both kind of trying to figure this out. Like, it's very, very weird. Like, I don't know, and I've opened up to not just you, but other friends about this.
You're opening up to the world about this.
Oh yeah, well, I'm open. Yeah, I guess so.
So. It definitely seems like you are working a lot with your anxiety in terms of therapy and your thinking. What do you do for your depression?
With depression, it's a bit of a different issue because, like, I go through most of my depression periods. Usually, I suffer from the physical symptoms like extreme fatigue. Like, you remember that one day I was literally in bed for 24 hours. I would wake up for like 2 to 5 minutes, fall right back to sleep. Like,
yeah, I thought you were dead.
Yeah, I heard you and Vivian talking. Like, should I go check on him? like most of the time when it's just physical symptoms, it's like I'm just in bed. But of course, physical symptoms are accompanied by thoughts. Been coping with the thoughts of depression by kind of evaluate my life, and I wouldn't minimize the feelings that I would be feeling. I would still acknowledge, okay, I feel really like upset, like feel very agitated, feel very angry. I feel like I could yell at any one of you, either you or Vivian, if you I don't know, just like annoy me at any second. Like I make a conscious effort to recognize that, okay, that's just like, there's nothing circumstantial going on. It's literally, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
Yeah, like your mental illness just is doing its thing.
Yeah, my brain's bullying me.
But what do you mean evaluating your life? Like reflecting, or?
When I say evaluating my life, I should say I look at the life I'm given. Like, I was born in a loving family. I have decent friends. And like I go even beyond that. Like I live in this relatively safe city, and then I dive even.
I like that you say relatively safe.
Relatively safe. Relatively safe city, and then I dive even deeper. I live in a safe neighborhood. Like, I look at all these things that I have that people around me don't have, and I kind of use that as like something that keeps me going. Like, okay, yeah, I might be upset, I might be going through some stuff, no fault of my own. Just gotta remember the good things in life, basically. Remember what you have. But I know with depression, it's easier to focus more on what you don't have than what you do have.
Yeah, I like that you say you can think about the good things without minimizing, because I know a lot of what I did was say, like, look at the life you have. Why are you feeling like this? You know, so you can use it as positive reinforcement without gaslighting yourself, which is nice.
And at the end of the day, you reflect on all the good stuff that you have, and then after that reflection, you just say to yourself, at the end of the day, I'm mentally ill. I can't exactly help how I feel. I can't help being anxious. I can't help being depressed. It all comes and goes. I know that I'll have my good days. I'll have my bad days. Some days I'll be up about doing all my work, doing all my chores around our house, our apartment room. And then there's some days where it's like, okay, I just need to not exist for today. Not in like any suicidal way. There's a difference between like wanting to die and not wanting to exist, right? I associate not wanting to exist as like just spending the day in bed, like being like, okay, I don't want to do all my responsibilities today. I don't feel up to it. I don't have the energy. I'm feeling upset. I'm going to take 5 and come back to it later. That's very different from suicidal tendencies, I find.
Yeah, but no, honestly, like everything you're saying, it sounds like healthy thinking, and that's great. Have you just recently started thinking like this?
It's something I've been practicing for a lot of years. Even in high school, I would think to myself, okay, well, look what you do have. High school is a little different though, because I was more minimizing my pain. Rather, like, I was like, okay, well, you have all this good stuff. Well, why are you upset? Like, it's like, well, you know what? My brain's bullying me, so I can't exactly. That's the reason I go with now is like, well, I can't help it. Like, it's literally my brain chemicals. Like, I really have no say about how I feel. My brain has control of what happens, but I don't.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%, because you have, and illness, and just as a diabetic may have a spike in blood sugar, you will have a drop in your mood.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of your thinking, it was it went from using it to minimize to like answering that question, why am I sad, you know? And that's cool. So we just talked about what helps you when you're in a depressive mood, and you talked about the physical symptoms, but what does it feel like in your head when you get really depressed?
Feels like there's a weight on my head, and that weight just keeps getting heavier the more that I try to fight it. Try to get out of bed. Trying to think about all the tasks that I have to do in the day. And everything just seems like a very Herculean task whenever you're going through a major depressive episode. And that's kind of what I've been experiencing within this course of my mental illness. Is like, I do have those occasional, like even in public, I have those intrusive thoughts of self-worthlessness. Sometimes they're brought on by like cringy memories. Like, I don't know if you've ever like reflected back on like something you did in the past that was really cringy, and then just all of a sudden your head, like, you're like, oh God, why did you do that? You're such a loser. Like,
oh yeah, 100%. Like even some of the shit I say in the podcast, or like some of the shitty things I do, because I have to listen again to who I was, and it makes me feel really shitty. But what were you saying?
I feel like, yeah, during my major depressive episodes, those are amplified significantly. Like, even when I'm out of my major depressive episodes, I still have those thoughts, but I can easily like just change my train of thought. Like, I can change my focus on like a happier topic, like, I don't know, post-COVID or something. But in my major depressive episodes, it's harder. Like those thoughts are more persistent.
Like it feels like those thoughts have more weight.
They have more weight, yeah. Usually in those cases of my major depressive episodes, the best thing I can do is just tell myself everything's okay.
Yeah.
And of course take my meds. Yeah. But in terms of thinking, yeah, just I recognize that I am dealing with a mental illness that causes intrusive thoughts. Got to remember that's one of the symptoms. Like a lot of the self-hatred that I feel in these episodes, I always try to remind myself, this isn't you. Like, this is your brain bullying you, basically. You're gonna power through this. You might take today off, take a day to recharge, take 5, regroup, and tomorrow you might be back to your old self, and you'll get up and you'll do your classes. You'll get a lot of house cleaning done. And sometimes the next day it's the same as the day prior. Maybe you'll need 2 days to recharge. It's always different. Like, but it's important to know that major depressive episodes have their limited time. Just mindfulness that you do in fact have a mental illness goes a long way to keeping you going.
No, that's a really good way to put it. It sounds like you're practicing self-compassion, but yeah. I'm gonna do like a whole episode on depression and my experience with it, but Do you find when you're depressed, it kind of seems like someone just kind of like sucked the color out of the world? You know, like everything you do is just bland. Like the things that you would be interested in are just
everything is pleasure lacking.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like there's just no, like depression is, in my experience, it's not like always being sad. It's like just wanting to dissociate, you know, like nothing is interesting, nothing is like the same.
Yeah, no. It's like you have a completely different outlook on life. And like that's scary that it can go from bright and colorful to dark and bland just like that. Like it's terrifying. And whenever I have those sudden mood swings, that's usually when I just begin my major, or like basically what I've been talking about. Like, remember that, okay, you've entered this episode. Just kind of ride the storm out. It won't, like, the color will be back again. But yeah, no, just my favorite profs and TAs in university have been ones that emphasize the importance of taking breaks. Like Scott Napper, for example, is
10 out of 10 beauty. Yeah. I just have a couple more questions here for you today. If you could go back and, you know, give yourself advice or tell yourself anything, what would you tell little grade 8 Nick who just started having these thoughts?
That's a really good question.
Thank you. I made it myself.
I would tell grade 8 Nick, don't fear other people's judgment. And that's really hard to that's really hard to practice, actually. Because we have this need, we want everyone to like us, right? Like we'd never want to come across as the unlikable one. Sometimes, in some circumstances with some people, that's going to happen. Sometimes we can't do anything about it. It's important. That's why it's important to maintain a healthy self-image. To take a look at yourself, say, all right, this is me. I like who I am. If people don't like who I am, they can shove off.
Yeah. I like you for who you are, warts and all.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is, you know, our listeners who might be struggling with anxiety or depression?
What I would say to the viewers suffering from anxiety and depression would be, it's all in your head. Like your brain's bullying you, basically, and you can't help how you feel. You can't tell people how to feel. You definitely can't tell yourself how to feel. You just feel. The best thing you can do when you're feeling low, when you're feeling anxious, just try and remember that your mental illness is making you perceive things differently. And that's like that negative picture that you may have of yourself or the world. Like, that isn't how it truly is. That's just it's just the negative intrusive thoughts that are invading you right now. It will get better. There's always, like I said, there's those episodes, and recognize that having a mental illness and like being diagnosed, like, of course it's not good, but it helps you. Like, it helps you put things into perspective. Like, okay, I feel like this because I'm clinically depressed. I'm clinically, like, I've been diagnosed with social anxiety or general anxiety, I know that like once you come to terms with your diagnosis, it's still difficult to like tread on without negative thoughts, but it's becomes easier because you're putting things in perspective of your diagnosis. Advice to people that suffer from depression and anxiety is that our perceptions can be distorted.
Yeah, that was really nice, and it's also not their fault. But yeah, I guess I don't really have anything else for you. You have any closing thoughts, anything, or we good? Gucci? Okay, yeah, well, thank you for coming on to the show today and sharing your experience about something, or about anxiety and depression. It was nice to have you on, so...
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Goodbye. So hopefully you guys liked this episode. Make sure to check out our website in the description and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. You'll also find some resources and references we used for this episode in the description. And once again, we are not medical professionals, and you should see your doctor if you're concerned about your mental well-being. We'll see you next time.